Hey everyone, this is Razib Khan here. Sorry I could not be there. So I'm just going to give a quick statement about the caste issue that is cropping up in the United States and that many of us will be having to deal with. So why am I talking about this? Why am I writing about this? When I live in America, that is the primary issue here. That I do live in America, and that it's ridiculous that I am having to talk about this. Uh, what is going on here is about American politics and American society and American culture wars. Caste is basically a smokescreen for deeper structural issues in the United States. And so, people who look like me are getting caught up in it. And it is something that is coming up in our everyday discourse, everyday conversation. I can tell you for a fact that I have multiple friends who've recently been asked what their caste is. Some of them were raised abroad, but some of them were raised in the United States. Some of them were raised in Britain. The only commonality here is obviously what they look like, what their ethnic background is, and they are being asked by white people often to explain themselves, and they sometimes cannot explain themselves. In the case of some Indian Americans, as many of you probably know, they know as much about caste as anybody else on the street. To give you a concrete example, I have a friend, Surya Yalamanchili, and I looked at his genetics and I was like, oh, it looks like you are of the Kama caste according to genetics. And he didn't know what I was talking about. So you had to call his parents, and they confirmed that that was the caste of his family. I think this story is illustrative of a dynamic that is not uncommon among Indian Americans, which may sound a little strange to people from India. But, growing up in the United States, caste is something that is in the books. It has no relevance to your life. In terms of how people treat you, obviously, they don't know any of this stuff. All they see is a brown skinned person. Um, you will be lucky in many areas and cases for people to even know which particular country from the Indian subcontinent you are from. They just will not know. Also, people do not understand. And why would they? They do not understand the details of like that there are different religions in the Indian subcontinent. Obviously, given my name, most people who are of subcontinental origin know what my family's religious background is. But I have a lawyer friend who started asking me about caste, and it turned out he just thought I was Hindu. Just because of what I look like. No, I'm not religious, so I don't show any evidence of whatever confessional identity I'm supposed to have. But for many white Americans, someone like me is probably going to be Hindu. They're not going to really ask in more detail. Some of you who are Hindu probably know that some white Americans are confused about the difference between Hinduism and Islam. During the war on terror. This is what you're dealing with. These are the people and the level of knowledge that you're dealing with. So really, this is in the United States a racial issue. When people are going to be accused of caste discrimination, or they're going to be asked about caste discrimination, they're not going to really look at your background. I've already been asked, even though my family is Muslim and I don't, technically have a caste identity. They just see what I look like. And so, one thing I want to emphasize in this discussion is in the United States, this is a matter of race and ethnicity. It's really not a matter of caste or community as it would be in the Indian subcontinent. It's a totally different social context. And I think that that is critical. And what is happening is after the Black Lives Matter movement, American society has been even more racialized than it was. And Indian Americans are getting caught up in the racialization. Like Bangladeshis, Pakistanis, everyone who looks like us is getting caught up in this. There are some fundamental problems with the Asian American model minority issues and the fact that we have brown skin. Some of us are quite dark skinned. If American society is so white supremacist, how are these brown people succeeding? Like, that's a question, that's a paradox. And one way that you can resolve the paradox is by saying, well, actually they're kind of white, they're white adjacent, which I think some of you have probably experienced, people telling you you're white adjacent. even though you're quite brown. Okay. So we're getting slotted into the American culture wars and the American system of racial hierarchy. And another issue now is they are using the word caste to talk about the way Black Americans are treated. Now, I think the problem here is caste in the Indian subcontinent is a sociological construct that has a lot of subtlety and nuance that does not translate in the American context. But Americans being who we are, what is happening is we are using the word caste, we as in people who read the New Yorker and the Atlantic and write for the New Yorker and the Atlantic, just to give you a concrete example of what I'm talking about. Most of you know about Isabel Wilkerson's book Caste. She went to India and she educated herself, but really it's about America, it's about America's history, and America's history is now being imputed on to people in other parts of the world. So understand how Indians and brown people associate with each other. What has to happen is it needs to be integrated and simplified into an Americanized racial system. So in this system, upper caste people, Brahmins, are white, and lower caste people and Dalit are black. And so the goal is to figure out which of us are white and which of us are black. And so, this is where the questions are coming from. They want to know if you're privileged or you're oppressed, and you're going to be treated differently based on that. Now, what I would say is this is just not relevant to the American context. So I think most of you who live in the United States can understand what I'm saying. There are no, I mean, unless you count Cupertino or Edison, there are no South Asian, Indian, subcontinental Desi ghettos in the United States. We mix with the rest of the population, and we're viewed as, frankly, somewhat of an amorphous, just like just bunch of brown people. Like, it's not Gujaratis or Bengalis or Tamils or whatever, or Pakistanis or Indians. It's just you're brown and you're South Asian, and you're probably not Arab, but maybe you are. I mean, this is the level of knowledge and ignorance that we're having to deal with. So we have to educate ourselves about what we're confronting, but we also have to educate the public. We need to educate the elites. Some of you have probably been tracking the Cisco case extensively. There are multiple journalists now who have written about the Cisco case in different fora like Reuters, and whatnot, and Bloomberg. The issue here is one singular case, which is now dismissed. And this case, most of you probably know more about it than I do in terms of the principles. Uh, I would just say that it seems like an unjust railroading. American discrimination law is very, very Kafkaesque. And so once the accusation is made, it's almost, unless you want to spend a lot of money, you're guilty until you're proven innocent. And so I think that's what was happening there, if you want me to be honest. But now this case is used as illustrative of an entire dynamic among people who look like us. Now, people who look like us are very diverse in our backgrounds, in our professional context, and also, whether we're second generation or first generation or whatnot. So it's really hard to generalize. I know people who, you know, uh, came from India relatively recently, and they still socialize with people from their own same region, often but not always from their same caste, but really same region. That's the primary thing that I've seen. And a lot of it has to do with food and language and whatnot. Then there's people like me, and a lot of Indian Americans that I know that are my friends, where, we're pretty Americanized because this is where we grow up. Um, we marry people of other races. Our children are mixed. So, this idea of caste and community doesn't really apply. Like, we have some other concerns. And so it's a little ridiculous to ask us even about things that have never touched our lives. Like, we were more often, there's racial discrimination and harassment happens, and I think a lot of you know exactly what I'm talking about. And it doesn't come in the form of what caste you are. It just comes in the form that you're brown and you're a terrorist, or all of these sorts of things. These are the concerns that are in America. This is an American problem. This is why I speak to it, because now it is something that is spreading from a few loci and a few activists. So what's happening is that there are liberal, progressive social justice organizations. They are being told that there's a pervasive problem. They have no ability and no way to actually identify if there is a pervasive problem, but they trust people who present information in a framework and a paradigm that they understand. So what they're being presented is that this is a paradigm very similar to the black and the white paradigm. And there are these upper caste oppressive people in the United States, and they are oppressing the lower caste people. That is something that Americans can understand, American progressives can understand, and that is actually what's happening in terms of caste in the United States. What needs to happen is we need to fight the narrative. What we need to do is basically strangle the baby uh, in the bathtub, because it's a baby right now. It's not that big of a deal, but the narrative will grow stronger and stronger if you don't push back. And so we have to push back as strongly as possible. We need to push back with statistics. We need to push back with narratives. We need to push back with rhetoric. We need to push back with our own real experiences, right? And I do think we need to fight with facts. We need to collect more facts. We need to collect more data. Equality labs cannot be the only data out there. Most of it's a problem with snowball sampling. We don't need to get into the details. There are some other research. Carnegie Foundation has a good survey. I think you guys know. We need to know all the facts off the top of our heads, and then we need to explain logically why the critiques and the arguments do not work in the American context. And I don't think that they do. I'm not trying to defend a system of caste oppression in the United States. There is no system of caste oppression in the United States because it doesn't matter in 99.99% of brown people's lives in the United States. Yes, I understand that some people will marry within their jati and stuff like that, but that's actually not that many people. If you look at the statistics, people that are raised in the United States, 40% of Indian Americans don't even marry other Indian Americans. They tend to be in interracial relationships. Of the remaining 60%, a lot of that people will marry across regional lines. They will marry across religious lines. They're basically Americans. And yeah, there's a minority of people who marry within their community, just like they do in India. Okay, like that's your free choice. That's fine. But even within the American context, you're still mixing with a broader society that doesn't understand all of these cultural things. You're not perpetuating or reifying any sort of system of oppression, because the United States, we are viewed as just another model minority. That is how it works. But they're trying to use another angle on us, because these social justice organizations, they need fuel and they're running out of fuel. They need to find more oppression, more injustice. And so they're creating oppression and injustice where there isn't any. And this is not to speak of what is happening in India or the Indian subcontinent. There's all sorts of things happening there. But we are here. We are not there. And we can't fix the problems that are over there. That's not our job. But those of us who are citizens of the United States and who are going to live here our whole lives, our children are going to grow up here, our descendants are going to live here. We need to be concerned of the events and the issues of America, and not these. Basically, this is a concocted narrative that is being generated by some particular organizations, and it's a small marginal thing right now. But over the last couple of years, I'm sure you guys have noticed that it has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger, right? So we need to start out with facts, and then we need to give a framework, and then we need to, come at people with the argument of why caste in the United States is simply not relevant. Not only are they wasting their time, they're also going to be racializing our identity. We're going to have to deal with these discussions day in and day out, just because the way we look. That's just the fundamental truth. This is not actually about caste. It's about race in the United States. Also, it's about religion. Those of you who are Hindu understand exactly what's going to be happening, and who is going to be, asking you questions about your faith, and why. And it's because it's been depicted as this casteist, horrible thing. And, that cannot stand. And the only way that we can defend ourselves is by speaking, fighting back, and arguing proactively. We cannot be passive. If we are passive, the narrative will shift, and we will be fighting a new, a new truth. The lie will become the truth. They say the lie enough. If you don't challenge the lie, it will become the new orthodoxy. Thank you.